I'm David Meerman Scott.
And I'm Reiko Scott, and welcome to Fanocracy Stories.
Today we have the coolest interview. I interviewed the head of NASA, Jim Bridenstine. Oh my gosh, I was down in NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. These guys have created the most amazing Fanocracy.
I mean, it's the best Fanocracy for you especially.
It's a good Fanocracy for me.
I grew up with a space museum in the house.
There's a space museum in the house. I wrote another book called Marketing the Moon. I'm kind of deep into it. I have a big collection of Apollo artifacts, and I had a chance to interview the head of NASA.
So cool.
And here's what's cool about the Fanocracy they've built. 31 million followers on Twitter, 44 million followers on Instagram. Walking down any street in the world, you see people with NASA t-shirts.
Yeah.
It's a government agency with fans. It's crazy cool.
You can't say that about any other government agency, really, right?
No, you can't. And it's because they've truly built fans by the way they do it. So let's see what Jim has to say about how they've built fans at NASA.
I think it starts with the Apollo program, with the idea that we sent people to the moon, and that legacy lives on today in really significant ways. To the point where, I mean, even today, people are wearing NASA shirts. We've got professional athletes that have their own branded their own branded shoes with the NASA logo. So I would say it seems like the brand is coming back in a big way right now, and I think a lot of it stems from social media and Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and so many other ways that we reach the public as an agency. But it also stems from, and this is I think the most important thing, it stems from stunning achievements. So, for example, back in November of 2018, we landed InSight on Mars. Well, that was the 8th time in human history that we've landed a spacecraft on Mars, softly, in a way that the spacecraft can actually operate as a robot or a rover. In this case, InSight was just a lander. But the important thing is that's only been done 8 times in human history. It's always been done by NASA. Nobody else has been able to achieve it. Although other nations have tried, NASA's the only agency that's been able to achieve it. Now we're doing it with international partners, which is another great development. And when we do these stunning achievements, it's on the cover of every newspaper worldwide. Even in countries that are not friendly to the United States, they talk about this stunning achievement of NASA. It's really, I think, it's a tool of national power that helps change the perception of young people all over the world towards the United States of America. Yeah. And I think it's recognized. It's absolutely recognized all over the world.
Oh, it absolutely is. And just the outward manifestations of what I call a Fanocracy, people wearing t-shirts with the logo on it, and the fact that National Air and Space Museum is like one of the most popular museums on the planet.
Yeah.
Tell me, how would you advise the CEO of any kind of organization, could be a nonprofit, it could be a company, to use the tools of social media to project an image and a message to grow fans in the way that NASA has done such a terrific job doing that?
So I think you have to have 2 things. Number one, you have to have a group of people that is starting with, that are interested in what you're trying to achieve. And then you have to achieve something significant. In fact, in the case of NASA, something magnificent. I'll give you just some examples. Not too long ago, China landed on the far side of the moon. That had never been done before in human history. I tweeted about it, congratulated them, said, wow, this is pretty spectacular, nice work, congratulations. Interestingly, I got called to Capitol Hill to testify on how NASA fell behind China.
Oh, wow.
To be truthful, we haven't fallen behind China. Again, months before that, we were landing on the far side of Mars, and we were doing it for the 8th time in human history.
And Mars is just a little farther away.
There's a little bit of a challenge landing on Mars that is at a different level than landing on the moon because it has an atmosphere. So you have to do the entry descent and landing in an entirely different way. But even beyond that, when we landed on Mars, that was in November. In December, we were entering orbit around a small asteroid called Bennu, with a robot called OSIRIS-REx. And we're in orbit around this asteroid in deep space right now. OSIRIS-REx is a robot. So it's going to go down and it's going to grab a sample from Bennu, and in 2021 it's going to bring it back to Earth.
Nice.
That same month, we flew New Horizons, which is the same spacecraft that gave us the beautiful image of Pluto. You remember that just a few short years ago? Yeah. Beautiful image of Pluto. And then we flew it billions of miles past that into the Kuiper Belt, where it took beautiful images of what we call Ultima Thule, which is a binary contact asteroid 4 billion miles from Earth. In the meantime, shortly thereafter, we're attaching a commercial crew Dragon to the International Space Station, one of the vehicles that will take our astronauts, launch American astronauts from American soil on American rockets in the coming, I guess, year. And that puts us in a position, all of these stunning achievements with a small group of people that are willing to communicate about it, and it has grown and grown and grown. So I would say NASA is quite frankly unique in the sense that we are constantly doing very stunning things that captures the imagination of a very enthusiastic fan base. But it all comes back to, look, we can do really amazing things. If we're not communicating about it, nobody cares. Right. But yeah, you have to constantly be sharing your victories. And NASA is really good at sharing its victories. It just so happens that our victories are quite magnificent.
They're amazing. My final question, when you were in Congress before you became administrator, were you a fan of NASA?
Absolutely. So without question, I was on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, subcommittee on space, which oversees NASA. I was also on the subcommittee on the environment, which oversees NOAA. About 40% of their budget is space-related activities. Most of their assets, in fact, almost all of their space assets are built by NASA. And I was on the Strategic Forces subcommittee of the Armed Services Committee, which deals with all of our national security space capabilities. So when I was in the House of Representatives, I was constantly dealing with space-related activities. And I put together a very comprehensive space reform bill called the American Space Renaissance Act. And we've been able to get, I should say, in my old job, I was able to get a lot of parts of that bill put into other pieces of legislation that we knew were going to pass. So the answer is yes. I've been a big fan of just space exploration and space activities for a long time.
So you have the ideal job in the whole world now.
Without question. I do think that this is probably the best job in the world.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you.